Welcome to the Ironhorse Home Brewery. I had some friends asking me what were the steps and when I was making my home brew from a couple people, and also just wanted to try out my new camera and play with that a little bit too. So we'll just go step by step what I do when I make my home brew. So first step here is I'm going to measure out and weigh my base grain with a scale that I have, and I already tared it out. That'll hang in the bucket, and then I have my bulk bag of 2-row, which will be the base malt. Alright, now I weighed out about 10 pounds of the 2-row grain. That's pretty standard for a 5-gallon batch of beer, which most home brewers do. On top of that, I also have my flavoring grains that I already got at that's going to be added for the beer we're making today, and I'm going to be making a nut brown. And the flavoring grains consist of some crystal, some chocolate malt, and one other kind of malt. I'll have to look at my recipe, but that is the flavoring grains that are going to color and flavor the beer under the 2-row that we measured out. Now we're going to go outside and grind up the 2-row. And here is my mill, and it's powered by a power drill. Put the grain in there, and it goes through the teeth, as you can see. And I'll just dump it in. I'll show you in a minute when it's done. So what the grain did, take this piece of grain, and the mill goes through the mill, and it breaks it into this. See, it gets the kernels in the center, breaks open, and that's the sugar and the proteins in the grain that you make to get the beer. Alright, the next step is I'm going to put the grain into my mash tun. Now, a mash tun is a converted cooler, a spout on the side so I can pull the wort out later. And in the bottom there is a grid I made with some PVC pipe, and as you can see, there's slots in it, and that'll let the wort drain through after it's been in the mash for an hour. So right now, as you can hear probably, I am heating up my mash water in my 3-gallon, and we're shooting for about 165 degrees. We'll mash at, when all the grain's in here, at 155 degrees, but you lose 10 degrees with the water transferring into the grain on some runoff on that. Alright, so I have all my grain in the mash now. That's all mixed in, and we're almost at the temperature we want for the water. Everything, we'll put that in, and that'll sit for an hour to mash. Alright, so we got all the grain mixed with the water now. And how we're doing on the temperature. It's still a little high. We want it to be we want it to be under 160, so I'll stir it a little bit here till we get the temperature down, but once it hits down below about 155, even 158 is fine. I'll close the lid, and it's going to sit for an hour. Alright, now we are going to sparge the beer, so I'm going to pour out some of this into there. What that does is going to remove some of the grain that's gotten in through the pipes that were on the bottom there. And then I'm boiling a gallon of water, and that is going to get poured over the grain as a final step after I pour all the wort out. Kind of clean it through, and also the boiling of the water stops some of the protein processes in the grain. Right now I am getting the wort out into my pot, where we'll do a boil for an hour afterwards. Right now I'm actually going to add some gypsum to the water, because in America we have what we call soft water, and in Europe they have hard water, and this gives a more authentic taste in the mouth for a European beer. Alright, the wort has now reached a boil, so I'm going to now add some Irish moss. Very scientific measurements here. The Irish moss helps in the processing of the beer. It cleans a lot of the proteins up after the fermentation process and sinks them to the bottom when they're fermenting, and it makes a lot cleaner beer. Then I'm now going to add an ounce of starter hops. Hops, when you add them at the start of the boil, actually gives the bitterness to the beer. So I'm starting with domestic Willamette hops. I'm going to put an ounce in, and that'll bitter the beer. And then after that, I've got Yakima Golding hops, and those are going to go in at 30 minutes in the boil, 15 minutes in the boil, and finally 5 or 0 minutes to the boil. So I'm just going to dip the whole thing in, whole ounce of the Willamette hops in. There we go. Got it all. And then we're going to stir it in, all the hops. That's the good smelling part of the beer. Ooh. A little fogged up there. Alright. Alright, the beer has just got done boiling for its hour, and I added the last of the hops in. Now I'm going to remove all the hops out, and it's going to go into a ice water bath in my basement. Alright, now I got it into my tub in the basement, and it was about 190 degrees before I put it in and added a gallon of water, and that already dropped at 50 degrees. Just doing that. Now I'm going to wait, and I'll agitate it and kind of stir, and got a long straw type thing. I'll kind of circulate through and drop the temperature even more. Eventually I want to get it down to under 80 degrees, about 75, 70 degrees. Then I can pitch the yeast. Alright, I just took it out of the ice bath and got the temperature down. It's about 80 degrees. It's a little under 80 degrees, so I can pitch the wort here pretty quick. Anyways, after it all came out, probably about 3.5 gallons, I added more water to it to make it up to the 5 gallons, the standard batch there. And then I've been getting my yeast, warming my yeast up, getting that ready to pitch. And the yeast I'm using today is a Brit Ale yeast, because that's what goes well with the nut brown ale. So after I pitch the yeast in there, actually I'll take an original gravity reading with my hydrometer first, and that'll let me know what the alcohol percentage is when it is done fermenting, because I'll take a final gravity and there's a math formula to figure out your alcohol percentage. Anyways, after that it'll sit in this container for about a week, and then after that it'll move to a glass carboy where I have some beer already in, and that'll sit in there for 2 weeks. And you can see I got a towel wrapped around. I like to wrap a towel around my beer, and I'll do the same thing here. That keeps light from coming in and affecting the beer. Hops can get affected by light pretty heavily, and that's actually why like Heineken and green bottled beers taste skunky. It's because light getting into the beer and affecting the hops. So after it sits in there for 2 weeks, I'll move it then into what we call a corny keg, these 5-gallon corny kegs. As you can see, I got a beer right now in there, and I got another one carbonating in there. And I do forced carbonation. I don't add priming sugar or anything like that. I just crank up the pressure on my CO2 tank there up to about 25-30 and shake the container, and that pressurizes it in about 4 or 5 days. And then that goes out here to my tap handle where we started. Alright, thanks everybody for watching.